Rosemary Finch pushed open the front door of her newly acquired shop and let out a small gasp. The interior was a charming chaos of aged wooden shelves, dusty corners, and a scattering of mismatched furniture. She couldn't help feeling a thrill of excitement mixed with trepidation. Restoring and organizing the space would take serious elbow grease, but she loved a challenge. This quaint building lay on the main street of Tempest Town, a place that Rosemary had visited as a child. The name had always intrigued her. Legend said the town got its moniker from the fierce storms that once rattled the valley, though Rosemary recalled mostly warm days, mild breezes, and a comforting hush in the afternoons. That hush was back now, with only the sound of her footsteps echoing on the worn floorboards. She set down her bags and ran her hand along the battered counter that would soon display her wares. The plan was to open an antique and curiosities shop, the kind that might attract both dedicated collectors and local rummagers hunting for unique finds. She began by taking a methodical inventory. Cardboard boxes lined the perimeter, filled with old books, embroidered tablecloths, porcelain figurines, and an assortment of vintage utensils. At some point, she knew, she'd have to fix the upper walls, where the plaster had begun to crack. For now, she simply savored the moment of possibility. This place was hers. Mid-morning sunlight streaming through dusty windows revealed a portion of the wall near the back room that had developed a noticeable bulge. Concerned about water damage, Rosemary grabbed a stepladder and carefully peeled away a bit of the flaking wallpaper. Behind it, she was surprised to find a concealed compartment. Ever curious, she poked a finger through a gap in the plaster. The hole widened just enough for her to reach inside, and her fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper. She pulled it out gingerly, expecting an old certificate or some property record. Instead, it looked like half of a rough, hand-drawn map. The edges were brittle, yellowed with age, suggesting it was decades old. A series of tiny symbols marched across the incomplete page, with faint notations in spidery handwriting. She tilted it under the light, trying to decipher the text. Though incomplete, it bore a rough shape reminiscent of the hills around Tempest Town. A rectangle near one corner might represent an old building or warehouse, but the corner had been ripped jaggedly, leaving the rest of the location unclear. A strange thrill coursed through Rosemary. She had heard rumors in Tempest Town of a legendary gold mine hidden in the surrounding hills, stories older folks shared with a twinkle in their eye. Could this be part of that legend? The notion seemed far-fetched, but the thought lodged itself in her imagination with surprising force. When her handyman, Bob Parker, showed up that afternoon to discuss repairs, she couldn't resist showing him the torn map. Tall and barrel-chested, with friendly laugh lines crinkling around his eyes, Bob was the kind of person who thrived in small towns. He leaned over the counter, studying the parchment. "Ah, this is interesting," he said, tapping a calloused finger near what looked like a series of dotted lines. "You see this symbol? Looks like the old marking for mining claims from decades ago, back when folks around here thought they'd strike it rich." You don't say," Rosemary replied, carefully smoothing out the paper. "I wondered if this might relate to that rumored gold mine. Do you think it's genuine?" Bob shrugged. "I don't see why not. The story goes that some gold was found in the hills, but the family who dug it up vanished before it could ever be properly located. Town law, you know. Who can really say what's true? But hacks and pickaxes were still found, scattered under tree roots up in those ridges. This might just be a piece of that puzzle." Rosemary felt a delicious spark of excitement. The building she owned was old enough that it could easily harbor such secrets. "I suppose this means there's another piece somewhere," she said quietly, running her finger along the torn edge. Bob nodded and chuckled. "That's how it usually goes in these legends, a missing half to complete the clue. Keep an eye out. Or better yet, maybe see if Betty Hamilton over at the library can help. She's quite the local historian. That evening, after Bob left, Rosemary locked the shop door and walked the quiet blocks to the small cottage she was temporarily renting at the edge of town. She couldn't stop thinking about the half map. In the warm glow of her living room lamp, she studied it more closely, noting faint landmarks, a creek, a ridge, and a circle marking some place of importance. Her mind teemed with questions. Who had hidden this map inside her shop's walls? Where was the other half? Most importantly, had anyone already found a fortune in gold? The next morning, she visited the Tempest Town Public Library, an old brick building dominated by floor-to-ceiling wooden shelves. There she met Betty Hamilton, a sharp-eyed, silver-haired librarian who greeted Rosemary with a knowing smile. "I heard you've been busy setting up shop," Betty said, gesturing for Rosemary to sit at a broad oak table. "What can I do for you?" Rosemary produced the half map. Betty's eyes lit up with curiosity as she rotated the parchment under a reading lamp. Yes, this is definitely reminiscent of older 19th century cartography. The tiny script, see how each letter is formed more like a swirl. That was quite common among survey groups back then. She pulled a thick volume off a shelf behind her, flipping pages until she found a similarly drawn map. This was from a group prospecting the hills in the 1880s. There's mention of a Donahue claim. Let's see. Donahue was rumored to have discovered a promising vein of gold, but disappeared before he could properly register it. Rosemary's heart fluttered at those words. So it might be linked to him. The question is, where's the rest? Betty's gaze danced over the brittle paper. I couldn't say for sure, but local law claims that Donahue's family was quite secretive. Folks later discovered half a map among his belongings, but the other half went missing when his business partner vanished. The trail went cold. Betty looked up. Legend suggests that if the two halves were ever reunited, they'd pinpoint the hidden mine. Maybe fate put this piece in your hands. Thanking Betty, Rosemary vowed to return soon. She spent the next few days working in her shop during the daylight hours and poring over local archives, scanning old newspapers, property deeds, and diaries by lamplight in the evenings. The puzzle was engrossing, and part of her felt light-hearted about it all, as though she were living in her very own adventure novel. However, she also sensed something else. A subdued tension in the air, as if certain members of the community were wary of her renewed interest in Donahue's mine. One afternoon she stepped out to check the mail and nearly collided with a willowy woman of about 40 who had been craning her neck to peer through the shop window. "Oh my, sorry," the woman said with a stiff laugh. "I'm Camille Bradshaw," Rosemary introduced herself. "I run the antique store here. Can I help you with something?" "Well, I was just passing by. I heard talk that you found something in the walls. A piece of old paper." Camille's eyes shone with curiosity, though her tone was casual. "You know how news travels fast in a small town?" Rosemary bit her lip, considering how much to reveal. "Just an old map fragment, probably nothing too important." Camille pressed her bright red lips together, as if calculating her next words. "You never know how these old stories might turn out, especially around Tempest Town. I'll keep an ear out for you." Then she offered a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and stepped away. After Camille left, Rosemary couldn't shake the distinct feeling that her half-map had become more than just her little secret. That evening, when she returned from a dinner at the local diner, she discovered her back door ajar. Inside, nothing seemed stolen except for a nearby drawer left open. It had contained only some old store ledgers. She'd stashed the half-map in a locked tin box, hidden in a more remote spot. Though the fragment remained safe, the idea that someone had come snooping rattled her. Who else might be looking for the map? Determined not to retreat, Rosemary made an appointment to see Harriet North, the head of the local historical society. Harriet's office was in an old Victorian house, perched on the outskirts of town. She greeted Rosemary in the foyer, leading her through a hallway packed with vintage photographs and display cases. After hearing about the break-in, Harriet sighed. This is not the first time rumor of that mine has stirred up trouble. I've seen a few treasure hunters blow through town every decade or so, but given that you actually have half the map from Donohue's era, well, that changes things. Rosemary admitted she was both excited and a bit uneasy, especially now that strangers seemed interested. Harriet nodded sympathetically. I can show you some reference materials, including old diaries that mention Donohue and his partner, a man named Tobias Marsh. Maybe one of those diaries offers clues about where the missing half went. But be cautious. If the word's gotten out, you never know who might start meddling. In Harriet's private reading room, a hushed space lined with diaries and journals behind glass, Rosemary carefully examined a series of pages from a leather-bound volume belonging to Donohue's niece. Mentions of late-night discussions, arguments over land claims, and a secret handshake with her father, all made for riveting reading. Then one entry caught Rosemary's eye. Uncle claims, if anything should happen to him, we must hide the map in a safe place. He gave the other piece to Mr. Marsh for safekeeping, says that only when the rightful heirs come forward, or when the timing is right, should both pieces be joined to reveal the treasure. That passage left Rosemary reeling with questions. Did Marsh ever return to Tempest Town? Did he pass the map down through his own family line? Was it even in the town anymore? Harriet allowed Rosemary to take a few photocopies for reference. On her way out, Harriet confided, I suspect if you find anything that clarifies the location of that mine, you're going to have quite a story on your hands. Just be aware that to some folks, this gold is more than a legend. It's a ticket to opportunity, or worse, a source of greed. Over the next week, Rosemary strengthened her store security, installing new locks, carefully selecting a safe place to keep the torn map. In between sorting antiques and greeting customers, she continued her research. Word had spread subtly around town that she was investigating Donohue's mine. She found herself receiving curious glances in the post office, lingering stares at the grocery store, and polite but pointed questions from neighbors. Yet no one came forward with the critical missing piece. Her next clue arrived unexpectedly when an elderly man named Truman Gray visited the shop one afternoon. He wore worn suspenders and carried himself with a deliberate slowness, as if every step told a story. Miss Finch, he said, tipping his hat, your interest in Donohue's mine is no secret. I reckon you'd like to see something. He pulled a faded photograph from his jacket pocket. It showed two men seated on a log, presumably Donohue and Tobias Marsh, with the faint outline of the Tempest Town ridges in the background. This belonged to my grandfather, Truman explained. Family law says that Marsh's descendants scattered, but some came back. I've heard rumor that a descendant might still live in these parts, possibly under a different name. Rosemary's pulse quickened. Do you know who that might be? Julie shrugged. Not exactly, but I always suspected it's someone with ties to old farmland on the north side of the valley. Marsh had a plot up that way. He set the photograph gently on the counter. Whether or not they've got the other half of the map, well, that's unknown, but keep your eyes open, especially for those who seem excessively curious. He gave her a kindly nod. I'm too old to chase gold, but I've seen enough to know these stories have a way of leading to bigger revelations. Later that evening, Rosemary contemplated her next steps. She was closer than ever to uncovering the truth, but she also knew that if there was another piece of the map in Tempest Town, it was in someone's possession. Someone who might not want it made public. Then her mind flashed to Camille Bradshaw, the woman who had lingered outside her shop, so keen for news about the map. Was there a chance Camille was related to Tobias Marsh? Deciding she needed more information, Rosemary ventured to the old farmland north of the valley the following morning. She borrowed Bob's truck, navigated dusty tracks, and passed fields of dried cornstalks. Eventually she reached an old farmhouse with a sagging porch. In the distance, an orchard of apple trees glistened. She hopped out. "Hello," she called. No reply. The front door was boarded up, though signs suggested someone had been around recently. Fresh tire tracks, a few footprints in the mud. She circled the property, stepping through overgrown grasses. A modest shed stood near the orchard, its door hanging crookedly. Inside, the stale odor of disuse greeted her, but when her eyes adjusted, she saw shelves lined with tools and unmarked boxes. One box carried the faint stenciled letters MSH, long outdated, but perhaps once spelling out Marsh. Heart pounding, she gently dusted it off, rummaging through old family keepsakes, faded letters, children's toys, a stack of postcards from other states. Memories left behind. Then, at the bottom, she spotted a small envelope. Carefully opening it, Rosemary found a note reading, "Property claim is worthless if it cannot be found." No mention of a map. Still, this was Marsh's property. Someone else had been here too. She relocked the shed and tiptoed away, the sound of the wind rustling through the apple trees. On her drive back to town, she couldn't shake the sense of being followed. She glanced in the rearview mirror several times, but no suspicious cars tailed her. That evening, at closing time, Camille Bradshaw showed up once more, looking a bit flushed. "I hear you've taken an interest in old farmland," Camille said casually. "I would have accompanied you if you'd asked." Rosemary remained polite but guarded. "I was curious to see if any historical records might remain there." Camille pursed her lips. "I spent summers on that property as a kid, though we weren't the owners. I recall hearing my grandparents talk about the Marsh family in hushed tones. They said Marsh's fortune was locked away somewhere. If you find anything interesting, let me know. I'm always on the lookout for local antiques." After locking up, Rosemary returned to her rented cottage, unsettled by Camille's proximity to the farmland. She poured herself a cup of chamomile tea and mulled over her next move. The biggest piece she lacked was the whereabouts of the second half of the map, and now she suspected that Camille or her family might actually possess it. That suspicion was confirmed in a startling way only a day later. While organizing her shop on a quiet afternoon, she heard a tap on the window. She looked up to see Camille approaching. The woman held something small in her hand. After slipping inside, Camille set a folded scrap on the counter. "I guess it's time we talk, properly," she said with a taut expression that mingled excitement and nerves. Rosemary unfolded the paper, scarcely able to believe her eyes. It was the missing half of the map, ragged edges matching hers exactly, the same style of lettering, and the crucial directions to a spot deep in the hills. A wave of astonishment mingled with cautious fear. You had this? Why bring it to me now?" Camille sighed, glancing over her shoulder to be sure no one else was around. "It's complicated. My mother was a Marsh descendant. She gave it to me with strict instructions never to show anyone unless I was absolutely certain they wouldn't exploit it. For years, I didn't believe the mine existed. Then I heard you found the other half. At first I thought I should retrieve yours quietly to keep it out of the wrong hands, but the more I watched, the more I realized you're not here to get rich quick. You're opening a shop, putting down roots. You've done real research with the historian and the library. I think you might genuinely care about preserving the story behind this place." Speechless, Rosemary retrieved her hat from its hiding spot. The edges matched perfectly. There was the complete route, zigzagging across the ridges of Tempest Town's foothills, culminating in a spot marked with a bold letter D. Presumably, Donohue's final claim. Excitement surged as she pieced together centuries-old secrets. "So it's true," she whispered. "We can actually find it." Camille gave a hesitant nod. "Yes, but we must be careful. I worry about others who might see this as a quick payday. The mine could be dangerous to explore, possibly caved in, and if we go announcing a gold strike, it might bring chaos to Tempest Town." That same evening, Rosemary and Camille decided to quietly confirm whether the old claim still existed. They set out before dawn the next morning in Bob's truck. Bob himself volunteered to drive them, having proven himself trustworthy. The trio wound through narrow back roads and over modest creeks until they reached a trailhead leading into the hills. Armed with flashlights, sturdy boots, and the now complete map, They followed a series of faint markers that matched the centuries-old direction. They found an old rock overhang carved with a half-faded inscription. Just beyond stood what appeared to be an entrance blocked by rotting timbers. Removing some of the decaying wood, they shone their flashlights inside. It was indeed a man-made tunnel, sloping gently downward. Bracing themselves, they carefully stepped inside. The air smelled cool and slightly metallic. Moisture dripped from the stone walls. After a dozen paces, Rosemary's light flickered over a pickaxe left leaning against the wall, rusted through but unmistakably from another era. Farther in, beams of rotted wood supported the low ceiling. They moved gingerly, mindful of potential collapse. When they reached the tunnel's end, a tangle of fallen rock blocked further exploration. Small veins of quartz glinted in their flashlight beams. Bob tapped a chunk with a small hammer, dislodging a few flecks that sparkled faintly. "Might be trace gold in here," he said softly. "Donohue's claim was real." Camille pressed her palm to the cold rock. "So it exists," she murmured. "But we'd need professional surveys and safety checks to do any excavation." Rosemary felt a mixture of awe and relief. She pictured Donohue and Marsh laboring here, forging a secret that would become legend for generations. "We've confirmed this is real," she said, "but it's not safe, not without the town's knowledge and cooperation." They carefully retraced their steps back outside. Dawnlight filtered through the trees, illuminating them in a warm glow. The magnitude of their discovery sank in. They had found the legendary gold mine, but it was no place for a mad rush. The structure was too unstable, and any attempt to exploit it quickly would risk disaster. For now, their best course was to bring the matter to Harriet at the Historical Society and see if the town might secure funding to preserve the site, turning it into something that honored Tempest Town's heritage rather than triggering a gold favor stampede. Gathering at the truck, the trio shared grins of amazement and satisfaction. As they headed back, Rosemary felt more certain than ever that she belonged in this town of gentle secrets and determined heart. Though some might call her discovery a gold mine of opportunity, she saw it instead as a treasure that, handled carefully, could unite the community. And she found herself oddly grateful for the twisting path that led her here, the torn map hidden in her shop walls, the hush of rumors around town, and the chance meeting with Camille Bradshaw. They had pieced together a story bigger than any single fortune. Tempest Town's spirit, in all its quiet resilience, would endure. In the days that followed, Rosemary, Camille, and Bob confided in Harriet North, Betty Hamilton, and old Truman Gray. There were hushed discussions on how to proceed responsibly. A small team from the university's archaeology department expressed interest in surveying the mine for historical significance. Meanwhile, Rosemary's antique shop thrived. Locals came in, drawn by curiosity about what other relics might be pulled from the building's walls. Some asked questions about the gold mine rumors, and Rosemary smiled enigmatically, gently steering the conversation toward the shop's wares. As autumn leaves began to turn the surrounding hills golden, Rosemary stood in her shop, placing a new inventory of antique clocks on the shelves. She paused to admire the gentle hum of conversation in the street outside. Tempest Town was alive with friendly chatter, cooler breezes, and that pervasive warmth that always drew her back. The map remained in a secure location, with both halves meticulously documented and copied for preservation. If and when the community decided to reveal Donohue's mine to the world, they would do so on their own terms, honoring the legacy of those who first dug through these hills and ensuring the safety and harmony of the town's future. Whenever she glanced at a certain spot on the wall that once hid that treasure of paper, Rosemary felt a sweet frisson of mystery and promise. She was no hardened treasure hunter, just a curious soul who had found more than she ever expected. In her small corner of Tempest Town, she had discovered not just an elusive gold mine, but a deeper mine of stories, friendships, and the steadiness of a close-knit community. After all, sometimes the real wealth wasn't the gold at all, but the adventure that led them there, and the place they'd all end up calling home.